Hello, good evening. I am the friend who always tells you stories, Mr. Dread. Are you ready for tonight's story? We are about to begin now. Are you afraid of ghosts? Those ghosts that we are so afraid of may be another person, the relatives we miss every night. Li Yang is from Nanjing. This incident happened when he was young, just 6 years old. Late one night, he suddenly developed a high fever. His temperature was alarmingly high. He felt drowsy. His face was red, and he couldn't open his eyes. The doctor said it was a viral cold, but he took medicine and the fever didn't go down. He fell into a daze and slept for more than 10 hours. It was in that state that he had a dream that he would never forget. In his dream, he saw two strange boys of about the same age, wearing old clothes, standing by his bed and smiling. They said to him mysteriously, "We know where there's a medicine that will make you feel better. Do you want to come with us to find it?" Li Yang was young at the time and had a fever, so he had no way of knowing what was going on. He even thought the two boys were friendly and agreed to go with them. They got out of the crack in the wall of the room and walked through a long, foggy path. Li Yang remembered that the road under his feet was not cement or soil, but a soft ground like clouds and mist. It was white all around and he couldn't tell the direction, so he could only follow the two boys. They had just turned into an alley and Li Yang was about to take the next step when suddenly, a tall girl appeared in front of him. She had long hair, wore a black skirt, and her eyes were as sharp as a knife. What shocked Li Yang the most was that her face was almost exactly the same as the photo of his mother when she was young. Before he could say anything, the girl rushed forward and slapped one of the boys in the face. Bang! Li Yang still remembers the sharp and piercing sound. The boy was slapped and flew backwards, falling far away like a rag doll. The other boy was so scared that he stood there, with his head down and trembling. Finally, he slowly let go of Li Yang's hand and stepped aside. The girl stared at Li Yang angrily, put her hands on her hips and started to curse him with a thick Sichuan accent. "Where's your brain? Do you believe everything they say? How old are you and you dare to run away with them? Aren't you afraid of losing your life?" She cursed and pulled Li Yang up, forcibly dragging him back, muttering, "I'm so angry. How can you be so stupid? You don't have any ability to distinguish at all." The scolding was full of blame, but also revealed a sense of heartache, just like an elder scolding a disobedient child. Li Yang thought he had done something wrong at the time, and he was so wronged that tears were about to fall. Along the way, she scolded him while holding his hand tightly until he returned to the original place in his dream. At that moment, he woke up. After waking up, the fever had not subsided and his body was as soft as water. It was not until the evening that he gradually recovered. That dream was like a vague yet clear phantom, remaining deep in his mind. At that time, he didn't pay much attention to it, and just thought it was a confused dream caused by burning. Until many years later, this dream suddenly became real. In the summer of 2018, Li Yang graduated from high school. It happened that his cousin in Sichuan was getting married, so the family of 4 returned to their hometown to attend the wedding. That was the first time that Li Yang truly understood his mother's past. On the night of the wedding, Li Yang's uncle was a little drunk, smoking and chatting with his father. As they chatted, the topic turned to the story of Li Yang's mother when she was young. "You know what? When your mother was in her 20s, she actually had a marriage." When Li Yang heard this, he was stunned at first, and subconsciously looked in the direction of his mother. She was standing not far away with a calm expression, but she did not interrupt. My uncle sighed and continued, "That marriage didn't last long, mainly because the child left." Child? Liang's heart was shocked. Yes, your mother gave birth to a daughter at that time. When she was a little over 1 year old, she got sick and couldn't be saved. As the uncle spoke, his eyes fell to the floor and his voice became lower. Your mother almost went crazy at that time. Later, she divorced that man and moved to Nanjing alone, and slowly started a new life. Liang felt his scalp tingling, and the dream flashed through his mind. That long-haired girl, that face that looked strikingly like his mother, that tone of voice that was both blaming and concerned. He couldn't help but ask, "Uncle, does that child look like his mother?" My uncle nodded. Yes, they looked exactly like each other when they were little. We all said that girl was a replica of your mother when she was little. If she were alive, according to seniority, she should be your sister. Liang suddenly remembered the scene in his dream where the tall girl suddenly jumped out and scolded him, and the Sichuan dialect words she said when she dragged him away. "Why do you believe everyone?" That night he lay in bed, tossing and turning, unable to sleep. The scenes in his dream became clearer and clearer. That girl who seemed strange yet inexplicably kind, perhaps was not a dream, but a continuation of some reality that he had never known in his childhood. Maybe she had been watching him all along. Maybe when he had a high fever, she really came back to save him. Zhou Hao suddenly received a call from his parents a while ago. On the other end of the phone, his mother's tone was very nervous, and there was a hint of panic in her voice. After listening to what his parents said, Zhou Hao froze and almost dropped the phone. He had always thought that ghosts had disappeared decades ago. After all, what era was it now? With tall buildings, neon lights, and people coming and going, who would really believe those old stories? But the parents repeatedly stressed, "We are not trying to scare you. This is real. Something really happened." Zhou Hao's hometown is in a small village in Hunan. Every summer, the villagers would go to the hillside to catch cicadas. That year, selling cicada monkeys became popular, and one could be sold for several yuan. So as soon as night fell, people would sway by the forest, men and women, old and young, all going up the mountain to hide in the forest. That night, his father, his brother, and his neighbor uncle, he went to the woods in the south of the village. There were many trees and dense grass there, and there were the most cicadas. Halfway through the journey, the three of them passed by a newly built grave. "Uncle," he mentioned casually, "this grave belongs to Au. Alas, he is only in his 30s this year. What a pity." Au was his good friend. They had played together since childhood. They went to catch cicadas together every summer. Even after Au went to Shenzhen to work, they still called each other every now and then. As Uncle he spoke, his eyes became a little empty, as if he was reminiscing about the past. Zhou Hao's father and brother didn't respond, feeling vaguely uncomfortable. It was late at night, in the dark, and it was a bit unlucky to mention someone who had just passed away a few months ago. Not long after they passed the cemetery, they began to split up and each went into the woods with a flashlight. This night was just an ordinary night hunt, but the next day, things became different. The next morning, when Uncle he saw Zhou Hao's father, he looked listless, with dark circles under his eyes and evasive eyes, as if he had not slept all night. Zhou Hao's father handed him some water and asked him if he was sick. Uncle he didn't say anything. He just lowered his head and silently lifted up his clothes. Zhou Hao's father was stunned. His back was covered with scratches of varying depths. Some had already bled and scabbed over, while others were still red and swollen, as if he had been scratched severely by something. "What's wrong with you?" Zhou Hao's father asked. "Uncle," he said in a hoarse voice, "I fell." It turned out that after they separated last night, Uncle he walked up the slope alone, but the more he walked, the more he felt something was wrong. The trees around him seemed to have changed positions, and he couldn't get out no matter how he walked back and forth. As he was looking around, his foot slipped and he rolled down the slope. When he woke up, his back was like this. He said that when he woke up, he was lying on the ground, face down and back up. The moment he sat up in a daze, he suddenly felt that the surroundings were extremely quiet, so quiet that he could hear his own breathing. He took out his cell phone and saw 512 clearly displayed on the screen. When they set out last night, it was only 10:30 in the evening, and they separated at only 11 o'clock. How could he have slept for nearly 6 hours in that forest for no apparent reason? What made his scalp tingle even more was that when he looked down, he found himself sitting on a used grave. The cemetery, which had been just a pile of grass the night before, was now clearly visible at his feet. He said his legs felt weak and his fingers were shaking. As for the scratches on his back, he said they were from a fall. But Zhou Hao's father knew that they were not marks from a fall at all, but more like marks left by fingernails. But whose hands would grab like that? When Zhou Hao heard this, he felt a chill on his back and couldn't make a sound. But that's not the end of it. A few days later, Zhou Hao's mother called again. This time, her tone was even more urgent than last time. On the other end of the phone, she lowered her voice and said, "Your uncle, he has been getting worse and worse lately. Auntie is almost going crazy with worry." It turned out that things did not end with what happened that night. From that day on, Uncle he became extremely restless at night. He often woke up around 3 a.m., sometimes in a cold sweat, sometimes crying for no apparent reason. At first, the family thought that she was too frightened that night and had mental problems. But on the 5th day, the aunt couldn't bear it anymore, ran to Zhou Hao's house, pulled Zhao's mother to the door, and complained in a low voice. "Your uncle, he has had back pain these past few days, and he said he kept hearing people crying at night. It was already late at night, but he still insisted on going out to check. I was so scared that I didn't even dare to turn off the lights to go to bed." Just as Zhao's mother was about to say something to comfort her, Uncle he came out of the room. His eyes were cloudy and his face was ashen, as if he hadn't slept for days. He was silent for a while and finally spoke. "That night around 3 o'clock, I heard someone crying at the entrance of the alley." Mother Zhao was stunned. "Is it the old Wang across the street? Doesn't he sometimes?" "No." Uncle he shook his head, his voice so low that it was almost inaudible. "I thought it was Lao Wang at first. You know his problem. He usually howls like a ghost during the day, and the villagers are used to it. But it was 3 o'clock in the morning that day, and I've never heard him cry at that time. I was worried, so I put on some clothes, pushed the door open and went out to take a look. The houses in that area were not tall and the alleys were narrow. There was an alley less than 2 meters wide between the two houses, which was particularly quiet at night. Uncle he said that when he reached the alley entrance, the crying sound was still there, choking again and again, as if it was floating from far away, and as if it was echoing in his ears. He held up his flashlight and shone it outside. The aperture flashed across the wall, small trees, fences, until a figure appeared at the entrance of the alley. The man was wearing dark clothes with his head lowered, his shoulders shaking slightly, and he was crying very sadly. He slowly raised his head, revealing that face. At that moment, Uncle he froze. His feet seemed to be nailed down, unable to move. Wasn't the person standing at the entrance of the alley the friend he had personally attended to his funeral a few months ago? The familiar facial features, the jacket he often wore before going to the construction site, even the small holes on the cuffs were exactly the same. Uncle he said that at that moment his heartbeat was so fast that it almost exploded, his legs went limp, and he collapsed to the ground. He suppressed his fear and desperately crawled home, his fingers scratching the ground until they bled. When he finally rushed back into the house and closed the door, the crying stopped. If he were still alive, I wouldn't be afraid at all, Uncle he murmured. But the way he looked at me that day is not something a living person can have. After hearing what his mother said, Zhou Hao's scalp tightened, and he quickly told them not to go out at night recently, and to call if they had any problems. His mother was silent for a while on the other end of the phone, and then she said softly, "Your dad was scared too. You know he never believed in these things, but this time he didn't dare to go out alone at night." Zhou Hao was silent for a long time, and he felt as if there was a hint of heaviness in the air. But he never expected that this was not the end. In the village, the second incident happened soon. Zhou Hao originally thought that what happened to Uncle He that night was just an isolated case. But a few days later, another incident came from the village, making everyone start to face up to the shadow that shrouded the summer nights. The person who got into trouble this time was Zhou Bo, a farmer in his early 50s who lived at the west end of the village. He was usually quiet and honest. That night, he went to the woods to catch cicadas as usual, carrying an insect net and headlamp. Because it was late at night and the mountain breeze was cool, he simply stayed a little longer. But until the next morning, his family had not seen him come back. Relatives began to look for him everywhere, and finally found him at the foot of a mass grave in the south of the village. He fell in the bushes, face down, lips purple, body cold. When he was turned over, his eyes were half open, with a horrified look, as if he had seen something extremely terrifying. Fortunately, he was still breathing, so they rushed him to the county hospital overnight. After the doctor examined him, he said it was a short coma caused by extreme shock, with no external injuries and his internal organs were normal. However, the villagers knew the place where he had the accident. It was not far from a used grave. Afterwards, someone asked him what he saw that night. He looked absent-minded and spoke unclearly. He only said one sentence, "Someone is crying there," crying as if his heart is broken. "It's him, it's him." When asked who he was, he refused to say another word. His eyes were dull, as if his tongue was blocked by something. From that day on, the village changed. Adults no longer mentioned catching cicadas, and children were forbidden to approach the woods. Even during the day, the area around the grave slope was deserted. The originally lively summer night became exceptionally deserted. After hearing this, Zhou Hao felt like a heavy stone was weighing on his heart. He immediately ran to the temple in the city and asked for 2 bracelets that had been blessed with cinnabar. He specially sent them back to his hometown and told his parents to wear them. Don't go out recently, especially at night. If you really have something to do, wait until dawn. Zhou Hao reminded over and over again on the phone. His father was originally a staunch atheist and never believed in these things before. But this time, he actually nodded and said, "Okay, I'll listen to you." Zhou Hao said he didn't know why. Maybe it was because the number of people in the village had been decreasing over the years. All the young people went out to work, and the remaining ones were all elderly people, with only a few dozen people in the village. As human energy weakened, negative energy became stronger. The forest, which had been bustling with activity, also seemed to become quiet. When the wind blows, the grass leaves seem to be whimpering softly, and no one dared to get close to the graveyard anymore. On August 27, 2024, Jiang Qir's grandmother passed away at the age of 92. According to her grandmother's last wish, Wanting was sent back to her hometown to be buried with her grandfather. Wanting's grandfather had died in 1981 and was buried in an ancestral tomb at the east end of the old village. The custom in rural areas is to wait for 7 days, which means that the burial will be formally held on the 7th day after the death. Therefore, Grandma's coffin was placed in the middle of the yard of the old house, and a shed was built to provide shade and facilitate relatives to pay their respects. On the evening of the 4th day, the family decided to open Grandpa's old grave, prepare a new coffin, and bury the two old people together. That afternoon, the sky was gloomy, and the village invited two old gentlemen to help carry the coffin and look at the feng shui. After digging up the grave, everyone carefully pried open the wooden coffin that had been buried for more than 40 years. Everyone originally thought that there would only be a pile of bones left inside, but no one expected that Grandpa's body remained almost intact. Not only can you clearly see the outline of his facial features, you can even make out the shroud he was buried in. Although the clothes are slightly faded, they still wrap around his body, like a person who has just fallen asleep. The most surprising thing was that his body did not fall apart, and it remained stiff when he was lifted up. One person held his head and another held his feet, and when he was gently lifted out, the whole village gathered around to watch. This is the appearance that only people who practice spiritual practice have. An old feng shui master whispered, "Don't move too much. Let him go intact if he is intact." According to the old custom, everyone wrapped Grandpa in white cloth again, moved him to the side of the courtyard gate, replaced the coffin with a new one, and temporarily placed it next to Grandma. After all this, it was dark and the family started preparing dinner. Just as the meal was served, something strange happened. That night, Jiang Qir's family had just sat around the dinner table, getting ready to eat. The smoke from the kitchen had not yet dissipated when the wind outside the house suddenly blew up, causing the lids of the two coffins parked in the yard to make a slight bang sound. Before everyone paid attention, they saw Du Lang, who was sitting next to them, suddenly stand up with an extremely serious expression. Du Lang is the son of Wanting's aunt. He is only 22 years old this year. He was originally a lively and humorous boy, but when he was about 18 or 19 years old, he dropped out of school and began to specialize in guiding people and asking questions. People said that he was born with a spiritual connection. Normally, he seldom lost his temper in front of others, but everyone could tell the difference in his condition today. He walked slowly to Grandma's coffin and circled it 3 times, his steps steady and stiff, as if he was being pulled by something invisible. His expression was calm, but there was an indescribable sense of oppression. After the third turn, he said nothing and walked back to the dining table and sat down. Cousin Li Teng looked at him closely and found that he was staring at the fire under the stove, his eyes unfocused. Li Teng had accompanied him on several visits before, and this state was too familiar. It's just like when there's a guest. He asked tentatively in a low voice, "Do you know who I am?" Du Lang did not answer, but slowly turned his head to Li Teng, stared at him for 3 seconds, and then swept his eyes to the other people at the table. Every familiar face seemed completely unfamiliar to him. His eyes seemed to be searching for something, or identifying something, with a mixture of confusion and inquiry. Wanting's mother, Du Lang's aunt, noticed something was wrong and came over nervously. "Changqing, do you recognize me?" Du Lang frowned and said in a slow and hoarse voice, "You can hardly be recognized. You were only 7 or 8 years old." Just a few words made the room quiet instantly. This was not Duran's tone, nor was it his choice of words. Li Teng suddenly realized something and his face changed. "It's him, grandfather." As expected, when Du Lang saw Aunt Wanting, his eyes suddenly softened, his eyes turned red, and tears flowed like a floodgate that could not be closed. That kind of emotional breakdown was not like the emotional excitement of a young person, but rather like the longing that had been suppressed for decades, which finally found an outlet at this moment. Then Wanting's father came over. He was the youngest son of Grandpa, and he was only 11 years old when Grandpa passed away. When Duran saw him, he completely broke down. He choked up and stretched out his hand, as if he wanted to hug her or wipe away her tears. His lips slightly parted, but no sound came out. His fingers trembled in the air, as if he could never reach the father-son relationship that had been lost for 40 years. Everyone in the family stood up. Some helped him sit down, some quietly lit incense beside him, and some began to persuade him quietly. "Dad, if you really can't bear to let him go, you have to think about the child's health. We know you're thinking about us, but when you come back this time, just take a look and don't bother the children." Du Lang was silent for a while, as if he was struggling internally or waiting for something. Then he suddenly spoke slowly, but that voice did not belong to him. It was a hoarse, old female voice with a northeastern accent. Everyone present was stunned. The voice was not loud, but it had the power to suppress the entire room. "Cigarettes, light 3, one after another." Li Teng understood something instantly, and hurriedly picked up the cigarettes, quickly lit 3 of them, and passed them over side by side. Du Lang took the cigarette and smoked it quickly. The cigarette burned out quickly between his fingers, and the smoke swirled in the room, like an invisible curtain, isolating the reality from the other side of the world. Then the voice spoke again. "Wine, some white wine." Someone hastily poured him a glass of white wine and handed it to him. Du Lang raised his head and drank it all without even frowning. Afterwards, some people said that they didn't smell any alcohol at all, as if the wine was instantly absorbed into the body. Then he put down his glass, sighed deeply, and cursed angrily. "You are such a blind man. You are talking nonsense while burning paper in the daytime. Do you think you are joking?" Your few cheeky words almost harmed the child. Everyone looked at each other and no one dared to respond. Li Teng asked softly, "Old lady, who are you?" "I am his immortal." Du Lang lowered his head, his mouth twitching slightly. "And I was brought here by your grandfather. If I hadn't stopped you, Your child would have been mentally and spiritually damaged tonight and would have been seriously ill. It turned out that when Grandpa was taken out of the old grave a few days ago, the integrity of the body caused a lot of discussion. Du Lang half-jokingly said at the time, "Maybe my great-grandfather was a Taoist practitioner? Look at how well it's been preserved. It looks like he's been embalmed." He even smiled and said to the coffin, "Maybe we are in the same industry. Why don't we have a chance to compare business someday?" No one took it seriously, but as soon as it got dark, Grandpa really came. The one who was really blocking Du Lang's body was this old lady from northeast China, his immortal home, who had been protecting him all along. "Do you think that death is the end? If I hadn't been here, this child's soul would have been taken away tonight." The room was completely silent, with the only sound being the crackling of wood in the brazier. He finished 9 cigarettes and drank all the liquor. Du Lang suddenly moved his right leg and gently scratched his knee. Seeing this, Li Teng immediately realized that the person had returned. "Changcheng?" he called out tentatively. Du Lang slowly raised his head. His eyes had become clear. He grinned and his voice recovered. "Did I scare you guys just now?" Everyone breathed a sigh of relief, and someone said with a smile, "You really are returning to life." But Wanting stood at the end of the crowd but didn't smile. She looked at the 2 coffins parked outside the courtyard gate and suddenly had a strange feeling. Grandpa is back, he really came. But he just wanted to see his grandma off for the last time. After that, Jiang Qir still couldn't let it go. Grandpa's return of soul added a layer of weirdness and complexity to this funeral that should have been filled with sadness. On the 6th night after the 7th day, because there were too many guests at home and not enough beds, she had to take a quilt and spend the night in the van where her grandfather's coffin was parked in the backyard. That car was the only one in the village that could transport coffins. Wanting was a little hesitant at first, but she was really very sleepy. Thinking that her grandfather treated her the closest when he was alive, she would not be scared by him. So she got into the car and lay down. That night, she slept unexpectedly deeply. In her dream, she saw a man wearing a Zhongshan suit and a gray felt hat. He stood at the door of the old house, his hands behind his back. He had a round face and was a little fatter than her father. He had a steady and dignified air that made people feel awe. He didn't say anything, just looked at her quietly, with the corners of his mouth slightly raised. That look was not from a stranger. Wanting felt as if something was pulling at her heart. She knew it was her grandfather. When she woke up, her eyes were still a little wet. She stood up and prepared to get out of the car. As soon as she pushed the door, she ran into her father. She casually said, "Dad, I dreamed of Grandpa last night." My father paused and lowered his voice. "What is he wearing?" "Mouse suit, gray hat, round face, a bit fatter than you." My father was silent for a few seconds, then nodded. "The one you dreamed about must really be him." Wanting was stunned. "Why are you so sure?" My father whispered, "I didn't intend to tell you because I was afraid you would be scared, but on the day Grandpa was brought back from his old grave, there was no room for the coffin in the back seat of the car, so we had Grandpa lie flat on his back. The place where you slept that day was the place where he lay when he came back." At that moment, Wanting's back suddenly felt cold, but she didn't scream or run away. She just stood there in a daze, recalling her grandfather's smile in her dream. That smile is not scary. This more like a farewell. On the 7th day, burial. On the 8th day, enter the room. That morning, the sky was unusually overcast. The wind was swirling under the eaves, making the paper money rustle. According to custom, the younger generation must burn 3 incense sticks for the elders and place them in front of the incense table in the old house as a farewell. Wanting, several cousins and uncle lit cigarettes together and placed 3 cigarettes neatly in the incense burner. The flames licked the cigarette paper and burned all at once. But after a few seconds, something puzzling happened. Except for the one lit by Wanting, the other 2 cigarettes went out by themselves halfway. My cousin took a look and said, "What's going on? Is it a smoke storm?" But Wanting knew in her heart that it was not the cigarettes that were the problem. She watched the cigarette she had lit burn to the end, until the last ash fell off, as if she had finished something unfinished. At that moment, a strong emotion suddenly surged in her heart. Grandpa didn't mean to scare anyone, nor was he obsessed with it. He just came to pick up Grandma and accompany her for the last part of her life. This wait lasted for 40 years. Wanting suddenly understood that the dream that night, the crying in the yard, the excitement when possessed, were all just a husband's longing, which finally found an outlet at the moment of reunion. Grandma has lived alone all these years and has never remarried, and Grandpa has never been far away. Perhaps for them, death is not a farewell, but a reunion. She lowered her head slightly, looked at the burnt cigarette, and said silently, "Go slowly on the road. Don't let her go too fast." This story comes from a contribution from a lady who just lost her husband. She said that she had never believed in ghosts and gods before, nor did she believe in the saying that the soul will come back. But after her husband passed away, a series of things happened, which made her waver. That was the day after his 7th day. The family was still immersed in grief, and the house was unusually quiet. She was sorting out photos in the living room when she suddenly heard the child shout, "Mom, look!" She looked up and saw a white moth lying on the living room floor. The moth was not big. It landed on the floor tiles in front of the TV, opening and closing its wings, looking unusually quiet. She squatted down carefully, stretched out her hand, and said instinctively, "Come, fly into Mother's hands." Shockingly, the moth actually flapped its wings and landed gently on her palm. She was startled and her hands were shaking, but the moth did not fly away. She lowered her voice and said again, "Are you him?" The moth didn't speak, of course it wouldn't, but it turned its head slightly, its antennae trembling, as if it was listening carefully. The child rushed over and looked for a long time, then said, "Dad is here to see us." In the next 10 minutes or so, she and her child took turns chatting with the moth, saying some things they wanted to say but couldn't. The moth stood quietly on their hands, sleeves, and green plants, without making any noise, like a family member silently accompanying them. Later, the child smiled and said, "Let Dad take a break and watch some TV." So the family sat in the living room as they did before. The TV was playing a program. No one spoke, and the moth landed on the frame of the TV, its head facing them. A long-lost peace quietly descended. After that, at some point, the moth disappeared, without making any sound or leaving any trace, as if it did not belong to this world. Originally, this matter would have just passed. But a few days later, on the evening of the 24th day of the 12th lunar month, She placed a few dumplings and her husband's favorite fruits on the dining table as usual, and prepared a pair of chopsticks for him. She remembered clearly that the pair of chopsticks were neatly placed side by side. But the next morning, when she got up, she saw that one of the chopsticks was slanted and the other was horizontal, as if someone had moved them. She walked over and whispered, "Are the dumplings not tasty?" After saying this, she actually laughed, with tears in the corners of her eyes. Another time, it was around 3 in the morning. When she got up to go to the bathroom at night, she closed the bedroom door and pushed it twice to make sure it was closed tightly. But not long after she returned to bed, she heard a click and the door opened. She thought it was the wind, so she stood up with her eyes half open to check. But all the windows in the house were closed and there was no wind at the door. The time was 3:25 in the morning. The next morning, she looked at the calendar. That day was the 49th day since her husband's death. According to Buddhism, the soul of the dead will stay in the human world for 49 days before truly leaving. She whispered to herself, "He came to say goodbye, right?" When she said these words, her voice was not loud and her tone was not sad. Instead, it was as if she was talking about a gentle dream, a tacit understanding that only she and he understood. "He was worried about us and couldn't bear to leave me, but I knew he had to go eventually." She smiled and looked out the window. "But he will come again, right?" Well, that's the story for tonight. I am Mr. Dread, a friend who will accompany you into the night with stories. If you have experienced something similar, please leave your memories in the comments section. May you have a peaceful night, with someone coming quietly in your dreams. See you in the next story.